All right, so hello, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages. This is episode number 22 of the Coders Startup Podcast. For those of you who are seeing this, you'll notice a bit of an inconsistency because I'm recording this sort of intro to the show itself in the future compared to the recording of the interview that I had done previously, which was yesterday night. So I'm very excited to get right into the details of this episode. We're going to be talking to the one, the only, the Pat Flynn of smartpassiveincome.com. I've mentioned him before on the podcast, and I actually managed to land the interview with him. And we're going to be really diving into a lot of the things that I think will apply directly to you, the listener, with respect to starting a business. There's so much around starting a business in terms of the trials and tribulations is the word that I use, the ups and the downs, and really just the length of time it really takes before your business really gets to kick into gear. So I don't want to just share my experiences about these particular topics, but I obviously wanted to share Pat's experiences as well, because Pat is a very established pro entrepreneur, if I were to say so myself, and who better to talk to than the man, obviously himself in person. So I got him on the line, and we talked to him in this episode, which, like I said, is number 22, and you can get the show notes for this episode via codersstartup.com/22. That's the number 22, and you can go there and see all the breakdown of all the links that he mentions, all the books that he mentions, and so on and so forth. So, without further delay, let's jump right into the interview, and let's get this party started. Here he is, ladies and gentlemen. This is the man in the flesh. If you're watching the video or if you're just listening to audio, you're about to hear his voice. This is Mr. Pat Flynn. How's it going, buddy?
What's up, Trevor? Dude, it's so cool to talk to you on your show now. You were a guest in episode 55 on the Smart Passive Income podcast, and people are still talking about that episode. So I'm hopefully going to bring the same value that you brought for me here today for you and your audience.
That's wicked. I can't believe there's still people. I've actually stopped hearing from the people with respect to that episode. So it's cool that you're still,
I'm still getting emails, man. It's crazy. Yeah. It was such a good story, and I'm so glad to see everything that you've been doing. It's I'm just so stoked that you're actually taking action and doing things out there to help people.
Yep. And we're just chatting a little bit before this interview, went live, and like I said, this is stuff, talking about business and talking about everything that I'm doing. It's just something that I can do for hours and hours and hours. And how long do I have you for today? Is it about 45-minute interview, 30 minutes, whatever sort of works?
45 minutes, 50, whatever you need.
Whatever I need. Sweet. So yeah, like I said, I love this stuff. I could talk for hours and hours, but obviously you have a little bit of a time limit, so we won't go for 2 or 3 or 4 hours.
We'll say that for the next one.
Exactly. So I really want to get into a little bit about who Pat Flynn is. For those of you who maybe don't know about Pat Flynn, I've already talked about him on the podcast, on the Coder Startup, but if you haven't had time to check him out, I understand we're all busy. So Pat Flynn is actually I don't want to say a bit of, he's really the reason why I got into business in the first place. So I started listening to podcasts in June of 2012, and I was flip-flopping between a few, and then I remember I did a search, something like top 10 business podcasts in iTunes or something like that. And I think Pat was either number 1 or number 2. And I said, all right, I downloaded the first 5 or whatever and started listening to them. And for some reason with the Smart Passive Income podcast, which is what Pat's, most well known for now, that's the one that really clicked with me, really resonated with me, and had me really excited and chomping at the bit to get my own blog and ebook published and all the stuff that followed, that ensued. So he's really the launching pad that I had in business. So it is truly an honor to have this man on the podcast. And obviously he's known for far more stuff, and I want to talk about a lot of the stuff that I don't know if he'd be less known for, but a lot of the products that he started up along his journey. So we're going to be diving into all that good stuff today, mostly focusing around the trials and tribulations of starting a brand new business, a brand new product, and sort of building it from the ground up. So how's that sound?
Sounds perfect. Thank you for that kind introduction, actually, too. So.
It's good. It's amazing. So actually, I also had, apparently my dad forwarded an email to me. He was so excited. He said, look, Pat Flynn actually responded to me. Apparently he reached out to you.
I remember that emails exchange. Yeah.
Yeah. So that was
awesome.
cool. Anyway, so Let's first, I guess we can dive chronologically into the Smart Passive Income blog and sort
Sure.
of how it got started, because I know there's a good story behind it in terms of the trials and tribulations that you had with it. So let's start with this. So when you started the blog, how, I know you got a bit discouraged at times. So can you talk a little bit about how the downsides of starting a business like this blog, and sort of what obstacles you faced, and even perhaps hinting at maybe pulling the plug on it. So give us some background on the blog itself.
Yeah, so even before the blog started, I had a website that was helping people in the architecture industry and sort of the design and build world pass an exam. And I started this site while I was still working in the architecture industry, simply to keep track of notes for myself and other people who were in my office. But that's it. Never thought I was going to turn it into a business. Then I got laid off in early 2008, and then had some decisions to make. And I ended up, long story short, turning this blog that I had built as a study tool for me into a business by sharing this with other people. In October of 2008, I launched an ebook to go along with it, a study guide, and it did extremely well, generating about $8,000 in that first month for a $19.99 electronic book, which was amazing. And then it was at that point that I started Smart Passive Income, because I was like, wow, I can't believe this happened. I didn't even know this was even possible. And my whole sort of concept of online business before then was, scam, red alert, all that sort of stuff. And here I was kind of just accidentally getting into it, and it was doing extremely well. I mean, there was obviously a big need for information to help people pass this exam, and I was the one providing that solution. So this site that I had, you can find it at greenexamacademy.com, it was doing really well. And I never really had to, because it had a lot of time for Google to find it. It was live for over almost a year and a half before I even thought about turning it into a business. So it had time to sort of marinate in Google and for people to find it and share it. When I started Smart Passive Income, I wanted to share how everything happened and just all the awesome things that were going on, how I built that business. And it was a really slow process. I was so used to just having this other site with thousands of visitors a day. And then I start this new blog, and I expected like thousands of visitors a day after writing these posts. And I was getting like crickets. I was getting nothing. And so I was like, okay, well, I have some work to do. So what I ended up doing was I started to build relationships with other bloggers that were in the space that I thought would find, or who had audiences that would find this information useful. So I found a lot of people, and I just started commenting on their sites. I started connecting with them, writing guest posts for their blogs and things like that to get more people to come over to my site. And slowly but surely, I started to build a little bit of an audience, but it was still just very little compared to what I had on the other site. And for a while, even after the 6-month point, when the sort of excitement died down, that honeymoon period that we all have when we start a new project, when we start a new website, it died at that point. And I was like, okay, this other business is generating tens of thousands of dollars a month. Here's Smart Passive Income. It's not making any money. Sure, there's a few bloggers who are commenting, and some people are finding value, but it's the same bloggers every time commenting. It's the same amount of traffic every time, just a few hundred on every post. And that's it. And I was like, I don't think it's worth it right now. Because it's just, it just doesn't make sense. I could dedicate more time and energy to this. But what kept me going was the few people who were reading it were really enjoying it and sending me emails and just saying, thank you so much for revealing this. You are one of the only people who's sharing so much information for free out there about how to start an online business. All these other people I don't trust, but I trust you. Like, please keep it coming. And I was like, okay, you know what? For you and you, let's do it. I am doing so well here. I owe this to other people out there. I remember where I was before when I got laid off. Other people might be in that same position. I want to help them out. So I kept going. And then more guest posts, more exposure. Then what happened was, after a year, I came across another turning point where, again, I reached another plateau. And I was just like, I don't know. I wanted to give up on it. And it's really interesting when people hear me tell this story, because now it's just this huge powerhouse in this space. Like, I'd be crazy if I did that. But again, I never knew it was going to get this big. And at the time, it just didn't seem worth it. And it's really scary, because a lot of people finish off their projects or stop working on their things oftentimes right before that inflection point. It's so scary, because you don't know if it's like that next day that you might, that things will take off, or the next person you speak to, they might have a connection that's going to help you out. And so you if you truly know that what you're building and what you're providing is adding value, you have to keep going. You're going to let the people who could potentially benefit from it down. And so that kind of, pulling back from that, then there's some stuff involved to help make sure that you know that you're doing the right things. For example, validating your ideas and understanding that you're getting into a market that is really desperate for a solution that you are going to provide and things like that. We can get into idea validation and niche selection and product ideation later. But what really was the turning point was after about a year and a half, while I was still continuing to write blog posts 3 times a week, again, just maybe at this point, 1,000 visitors a day, which is nothing compared to the 8 to 10,000 on the other site still. I was featured on a site called entrepreneursjourney.com. This person actually asked me to do an interview for his podcast and then wrote a nice little article talking about how I'd made X amount of dollars in a year. And then that just opened up the floodgates to a whole mess of traffic and people talking about it, sharing it, all those sorts of things. That was sort of my first sort of here's Pat Flynn. And it really was because I had built a relationship with that person. That was a blog that I actually read myself and I really enjoyed. I shared a lot of his stuff. I would often reference his stuff in my own posts. So we kind of, even without actually talking to each other, we established this relationship. You know, like I was helping him out. I was providing value to him. And then he reached out to me because he noticed that I was doing this for him. I'm not sure if I had connected with him on social media at that time, but that's something we can all definitely do now if you want to make connections with people like that, especially on Twitter. And then he ended up featuring me, and that opened up the floodgates. And then Darren Rouse from ProBlogger.net, another huge multi-6-figure follower blog, featured me in a similar fashion. And then it was kind of just off to the races from there. But then after about 2 years, I got to a point, maybe it's about after maybe about 2 years. Again, the timeline's a little bit off here, but the sequence of events is right. I found another plateau, and it was a much higher plateau because every time you get a rush of traffic, you kind of come back down higher than where you were, but then you plateau off. And I was like, okay, what can I do to get new people to come see my site? Because every time it was just the same bloggers every time. That's like the biggest thing I would notice. The numbers were stagnant. And that's when I started a YouTube channel. I had actually wanted to do a podcast at the time. I had even in December of 2008, just a couple months after I launched the blog, mentioned that I wanted to do a podcast. I even had a blog post dedicated to it with a recording using brand new equipment that I bought for a podcast. This is December 2008. My podcast didn't come out until July 2010, so a year and a half later. But I'll talk about the podcast in a second and why it took so long. But I decided to do the video because even though I was still scared of my voice, which is one of the reasons why I didn't want to do a podcast right away, and I didn't want to put my face on screen. So I started recording a lot of the things I was doing using a tool called ScreenFlow. There's another one out there called Camtasia Studios. What essentially it does is it helps you record what's going on your screen, and then you just talk over what's happening. So I don't have to put my face on camera, which is what I was scared of doing, but I could do these videos. And so I started a YouTube channel, and I just kept adding tutorials after tutorial. Every cool little thing I figured out how to do or learned how to do, I would just create a tutorial for it. How to set up a Facebook page, how to do this on Twitter, how to do this on your blog. I would just do that. And these were 5 to 10 minute videos. And then over time, maybe a month, people started to share them. People started finding them. Google started to rank them really high. YouTube ranked them really high. And there's a lot of videos that I've created 4 or 5 years ago now that are ranking at the top for certain keywords that are continually driving me traffic now. So that was cool. And that's sort of been a really cool launching pad into a new whole set of people who follow my site now. And then in July of 2010, I launched my podcast finally. And part of the reason was because, like I said, I was too scared to record my voice, and because the microphone just makes you sound so real, like it sounded even worse to me because I was just like, no, I don't like my voice, but I ended up doing it anyway. I remember recording the first episode. It took me 3 tries to get it right. 4 hours to record one episode just because I had to do retakes, and I was just like wanting it to be perfect. And that last take, I was just like, you know what? Screw it. I'm just going to go. I'm not going to edit. I'm just going to go raw. And then I've been that way ever since. And in the beginning, I mean, I don't even like listening to my earlier episodes because I was just didn't know what I was doing. But you got to get started with whatever it is that you're doing. You just got to go. And the best teacher is experience. And you just got to put yourself out there. And nobody said anything bad about my voice, funny enough. Although it might sound a little bit hoarse now because we're right at the tail end of me being sick, actually. But we're okay.
No, okay.
No, we're good. We're good.
Okay.
And the podcast has just done tremendous things to launch my brand. I did a survey in 2011, I believe, asking my audience, my blog audience actually, just asking on my blog, how did you first find me? And with 7,500 people responding, the numbers blew me away. By far, number one, podcast at 19%. So 1 out of every 5 people who are reading my blog now found me on my podcast, which is huge. That number blew me away. And that was only doing a bi-weekly show. So every other week at that time. And that's when I figured out, okay, maybe I should do a weekly show and ramp it up a bit because it's doing so well. Second place was YouTube at 18%. So nearly 1 out of every 5, again, coming from YouTube. So even though I consider myself a blogger and most people knew me from my blog, the way I was reaching people were from these external platforms where there were millions of people, where there are millions of people searching for information who may not be looking for it on Google or on a blog. And then third place was links from other sites. So like I mentioned earlier, those features on those other sites and many other sites who have since linked to me. And then it was Google, Facebook, Twitter, and all the things that most of us spend most of our time on, which is really interesting. And so that worked out really well. And then from there, I've been able to do a lot of other things that have scared the crap out of me. But it's funny. Every time something scares the crap out of me, if I do those things, amazing things happen on the other side of it. Like the videos, like the podcast, and now public speaking and writing books and all those sorts of things. So it's crazy. So if you guys are out there and you're just starting out and you're scared, good. It means that you care about what you're about to do. And it means that what you're going to do is awesome and that you have to do it too. There's a great book out there. I don't know if Trevor's recommended it yet, but it's called The War of Art by Stephen Pressfield. Not The Art of War by Sun Tzu. It's The War of Art. And in that book will kick your butt. And if you're having some resistance in your head, I highly recommend it. There's a little bit of language in there that's not appropriate for kids, but just a little disclaimer. But that's huge. I mean, because you are really the only one that's going to stop yourself. And oftentimes it's ourselves that will do the most damage.
So good. I mean, there's so many times where I wanted to just jump in there.
Sorry, I talked a lot and it was like,
but this is why. So when I see Pat talking, when I'm physically looking at him and watching him as he's talking and saying all this stuff and listening to his voice and the inflections and everything, like that is the passion that you need. I mean, when we're talking about business and the fact that we can go so long and talk at such length and even in such detail that you can remember all that stuff from so long ago, that's the passion that you need to get by in this business, because it's hard. It really is hard. But I remember reading a quote, I'm going to butcher it, but it was fairly, philosophical. It was something like, look at yourself in the mirror. That's your competition.
Yeah, love it.
And it's so true, because just like you said, if it scares the heck out of you, good. It should, because it's difficult. And if everybody could do it, of course, we've heard this many times, then everybody would be an entrepreneur and everybody would be making, 6 or 7 figures a year or a month. But the reason why is because it's hard. And you need to have that passion. So thank you, Pat, for doing that, for talking. And I'm so glad I didn't interrupt you. I let you go. And awesome. So good to hear the backstory. So good to hear that you had struggles. What was it? 3 occasions you felt like you wanted to quit with the blog, which is now a powerhouse. I was just talking in the last episode of the Coder Startup, or was it it might have been 2 ago, with my own business. I actually had this conversation with my dad, who is my CFO. I told him, you know what, I'm gonna sort of pull the plug on my business. I'm going to put it into what I called maintenance mode, which was just to do the absolute minimum to sort of make it keep on going and just sort of letting it get by. And it wasn't until I said that out loud to him that it actually picked up, and I had the best month I've ever had, which was preceded by, again, the best month I've ever had, which was just last month, which was pretty much a 5-figure month for me, which was the most I've ever made in a business. So it just goes to show you could be so close to success. And if I had stopped, I would not have hit the place that I'm at now. And it's just so ridiculous when you look back on it. And then this is sort of the next one I wanted to get into. I know you have something to say, but the sort of, you look back on it and see all the signs. All the signs were there to say that it was going to succeed, but I was ignoring them. So anyway, before we go into that, go ahead. I know you're going to say something. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, before you said you had considered going into maintenance mode, and that's what made you sort of get ahead. You obviously didn't go into maintenance mode. What was it when you said that and actually auditorially hearing it was like, you were like, no, I can't do that? Is that kind of what pushed you?
It was, and I love this. Now you're interviewing me.
Sorry, I'm in my interview mode.
You know
Like,
what I mean? This is
whenever I get in front of this thing.
Yeah. So this is, it was partly because I said it out loud. Yes. Once you say something out loud, it makes it real. And it hurts because I've been working on this business for about 3 years. So to be working on something for 3 years, to put your heart and soul and everything into it, to quit your full-time job and exclaim to the world that this is what you're going to do, and then to say, you know what, I think I'm going to say that I failed at it, that is so hard to do. And so partially it was for me saying that, but the next thing was I said I had to sit down and say, okay, what systems am I going to implement to make it so that I can put it into this quote unquote maintenance mode in such a way that it won't require a lot of my time and effort. This means hiring people to sort of, do the show notes for me, which I never had before. And hiring a video and an audio editor, just to get those tasks off of my shoulders, which I used to do. And just to make it sort of the minimum, not minimum viable product, but minimum viable, effort that I would need to put into it to make it work. And as soon as I did that, and as soon as I implemented one particular system, which I've already talked about, I won't get too much into it, but implementing a good autoresponder series, that's when I started to see the sales. That's when everything started to pick up. And it was just so obvious that I didn't have a good autoresponder. I did not have a good one. There was no goal for my autoresponder before. And then I said, okay, putting it in maintenance mode, how am I, what's the goal of this new autoresponder going to be so that I can put it, set it once and forget it and know that it is a good autoresponder. So I figured out the goal, set it up, and then boom, my business exploded.
That's awesome. So it's not maintenance mode. Maintenance mode made me feel like you were just kind of like, okay, whatever. But now, I mean, you're considering how you can automate it. I mean, perhaps it's automation mode. The minimum viable Trevor that's needed. Is where I was going with that. So that's smart business. I mean, that I'm doing that right now too, and I'm looking for ways all the time. How can I do something that I do all the time without me actually having to do it? And this is where software and coding often comes into play, actually.
Absolutely. And it's for sure. I mean, I leaned heavily on my software background, which is great for the listeners out there. We're all coders, so it's great that we have that skill set to rely on, but sometimes that can play at our disadvantage because I spent a few days implementing something and then realized there's already a solution out there that I could pay one time. It was like $37 for it. And I had to slap myself in the head. I was like, oh no, I just wasted 3 days and I could have spent $37.
I've done the same thing.
Problem. So any case, the big lesson there though, that I learned is the signs. And that's what I was sort of hinting at that I wanted to maybe get into and touch on. What are the signs, if you can identify any, in your businesses? So I'm talking about all the ones that you've started up, and you could pick any one in specific, in particular that you want to talk about now. But and I would ideally want one of each example, one of a failure and one of a success if you have it. What's a situation where you could point out the signs that you were able to see that they were going to lead to either success or failure? Like you mentioned, you had the bloggers reaching out to you and saying, hey, Pat, I really love your stuff. Please don't stop, or please keep it coming, I guess was their language. To me, that's a good sign. Yeah. I have those same signs. What are the big ones that you've been able to, let's say aggregate and identify as either a good sign or a bad sign to predict if the company is going to succeed or fail?
Right. Well, good signs, I mean, like you said, hearing from your audience, if you have one already, being mindful of what they're thinking about what you're doing. And, one thing for me, and I don't know if you can see this here in the back, for those of you listening, I'm pointing to a wall in the back here behind me that is completely full of thank you notes and letters that people have sent me via snail mail, many of them handwritten. And I go to my mailbox every single week and I get a new handful of those. And that is a great sign for me that I'm doing something right. And oftentimes I'll get into a state of mind where I'm like, I'm losing energy, or I might not be thinking I'm actually making a big impact on people's lives. I just look behind me and boom, I'm right back into work. I mean, this is a good sign that I'm doing things the right way too, especially in this very delicate space of online business and internet marketing that I'm in. This is great. So I often use that as an indicator. But then there are, of course, analytics that will tell you whether things are going well or not. Obviously, for podcasts, for example, downloads and rankings, those things are always help. But also reviews and ratings, which come from the audience. And then there's traffic to your website and comments, and those are fine. But I really think you have to actually talk to the people that you are targeting to see what really is happening. I mean, those numbers are often just vanity measurements. I mean, you want to really get deep into what people are thinking. So I often do this. I highly recommend this for anybody in any niche doing anything who has a target customer, is to actually get on Skype with them or get on a phone call and just have a conversation with them. Not trying to sell them anything, but just asking them questions about what their biggest pains are, what their biggest problems are, what a good potential solution was, what's something that they do every day that they wish they didn't have to do, what's a repetitive task that they just hate doing, what's the most, what emails do they get that they hate answering? Those types of questions can help you figure out what's going on in your audience's head. In terms of signs of things that are failures, and I've had many failures. I mean, I remember trying to get into software back in 2010 when a couple of my buddies, they created WordPress plugins that were really successful, like 6-figure a month successful. And I was just so like, wow, that's a huge opportunity right there. I think I could do this too, because they weren't coders. They were just people with ideas who hired coders. And I am not a coder myself. And I was like, I can hire people and do some cool stuff too. And so I got really into it fast, and that was a huge mistake. I hired a company to do 2 at the same time. Mistake number 1.
Yeah.
For $10,000. And I was forcing myself to come up with an idea. I didn't go validate it with anybody. I didn't, it was just like essentially, okay, what might make a good idea? And I had that built, and it was just crap. I mean, I was not thinking at all. And even though the idea was good, I didn't wireframe it. I didn't give the developer exactly what every page, every button, every word is. So they had the artistic license to do whatever they wanted and fill in those gaps, which were not what I envisioned. And there was just a lot of back and forth. Those things never went to market. Nobody ever saw one of those plugins on their website, and it just wasted $10,000.
So yeah, it's all about that passion. You need to make sure that what you're getting into it for the right reasons. Pat was talking about how he got into it perhaps for the wrong reasons, which was, chasing the money. And a lot of my successes that I've seen have come from me building software sort of out of necessity. So I found an idea that I wanted to have. I wanted to have a solution that didn't exist yet, and I went out there and I built that solution because, like I said, we're all coders here, present company excluded, but or we have the means by which to create the software that we feel that we need. So right. That's a huge, benefit for us coders, and it's a huge positive, because if it doesn't work out, at least you've created something that you can use, right? So I know that right. That's maybe a good lead in. Let's see how the internet connection is now to something that Pat is working on right now, which is the Smart Podcast Player. Is that correct? Yeah, I mean, you had mentioned building something out of something you just need yourself, and that's exactly where this piece of software came from. And this example is what I feel is a much better approach to software and building something very useful, and that's actually very successful now, which is really cool. So the story behind this is I came out with a second podcast last year called Ask Pat, which is a 5-day-a-week show. It answers a voicemail question from the audience every single day for 5 days a week. And I didn't want to have to, and for those of you who don't know podcasting lingo, don't worry about it, but typically when you come out with a podcast, you have to come out with a blog post to serve that podcast, and then a directory will read that feed, and then the podcast gets played off of those directories like iTunes, Stitcher. Anyway, I didn't want to have to blog post every single day for 5 days a week to serve this particular show. So I needed a player or some way to serve this show in a way where I didn't have to do that. But also I wanted to make it look nice. And I needed a player, essentially a front-facing web-based player that could make my podcast look good, that could help share the podcast when people view it on that page, because that would be the one page they would go to. They wouldn't go to each individual episode. They would go to just this one page and listen to each question. And they would be able to search through the other questions that were there and easily play them from this one thing. So I came up with some things that I wanted done. I went to my team and they had some suggestions too for things that might be helpful. And then we created what was called the AskPat Player, because this was a player that was built to serve AskPat. And it was perfect. I loved it. It did exactly what it needed to do. And once it went up on AskPat.com, immediately I got emails from people who said,
where did you get that player? And I was like, the funny thing was, at first I was like, well, we actually made it ourselves, and you can't have it because it's mine, type of thing. And then after like the 10th email, I was like, hold on, like this is an opportunity here.
Talk about good signs.
Yeah, I mean, just the emails of people wanting it and people complimenting it. And when you build something for yourself and people compliment it, that's an obvious sign as well. People wanted it, and so we turned it into a WordPress plugin. That took about 2.5 months to turn around, and then we distributed it in a beta fashion. So we had some users come on and pay quite a low price to get access to it. We had 250 licenses at first, sold out within a day. And then we worked with those people to make it even better. So we did launch with a semi MVP because it was exactly what I wanted. It had bells and whistles for me when it was first created. And then we turned it into the WordPress plugin, which is now called the Smart Podcast Player, to go on with my brand, Smart Passive Income. And so we didn't add any new features at that point, even though there were a lot of features that I wanted to add in, and there was a lot of requests coming in too from people as they knew it was going to be built. But no, we just launched it sort of MVP, and then we worked with the people who were part of that beta program to see how they liked it, how they used it, how they could break it. And that was helpful because they knew going into it that it wasn't sort of a perfectly coded piece of software, and that there was potential to break. So when it did break for some people, depending on the versions of WordPress they were on, the versions of themes they were on, the versions of themes on different versions of WordPress they were on. I mean, there's just so many variables. I mean, it makes me like, okay, this other piece of software I tried doing in 2010, what if that worked out? How would I be able to make that compatible with everything else that has happened since 2010? Like, I'm so lucky that didn't work out. I didn't even have a customer service team in place. Like, if people had bugs or something, I'd have to go back to this company who was doing all these other things for other clients. It would just be a complete mess. But this time I had a customer service team to serve those people with bugs. If there were bugs that people couldn't figure out on their own on my team, they handed them off to the technical team. And then we added a bunch of new features, squashed all the bugs, came out with another beta release, opened up another 150 licenses, sold out in a day because we didn't want too many things. And every new feature we added just was like a new round of testing, a new round of things that could break, a new round of compatibility, potentially, incompatibilities. And then finally this year in January, we released in version 1.0. So to the public, full on. And it's been doing really well. Very happy with how it turned out. We combined the launch with some brand new features as well, including speed control. So if you're listening using Smart Podcast Player, you can listen at multiple speeds, which a lot of people enjoy doing on mobile phones. This is the first time that solution's been available on the web. So we're really happy with it, and it's doing really well. Now we're in the mode of, okay, we haven't done any JV partnerships yet to help promote it, which is sort of the next step. So finding people who have podcasters in their audience to help promote it, because I guess we're getting into sort of marketing now, which is good.
And actually, I'll pause you there because I just want to say, for all those who can see it, I believe I was part of the second group of beta purchasers, and along with that, I got the AskPat T-shirt.
Yeah, so
awesome. If you're looking for some more marketing swag, you can give away some T-shirts. So anyway, sorry, continue going.
No. I mean, the T-shirts were fun, but you definitely don't have to do those things. And oftentimes when you tell people T-shirts, they're like, yeah, and that's the only thing they do. Like, there are more important things than T-shirts. I just want to make sure you know that. Yeah. But connecting with people who are influencers, giving people free versions of what you have to be able to test it out and then share it and have their audience experience it as well, and then come over to you and want to buy it from you. And then we're also working with split testing certain things on the sales page in terms of what's being said in different headers or where the buy now button is. We're going to play around with the pricing a little bit as well. We currently have it for $97 annual, but we're actually going to be implementing a monthly price because some people don't want to part with $97 right away. But we're going to do $9.99 a month. Actually, you're the first one hearing about this, Trevor. Actually, so we're gonna test that out and we'll see what happens. We're also going to play with potentially a freemium version, so a stripped down version but free for everybody. And then that will give us access to their email, in which case we'll have a drip funnel in terms of an autoresponder, like you said, is very important. So the moment somebody get access to one of the free ones, for example, we can ask them a day later how they're enjoying it. On day 2, we can give them updates on why they might want to upgrade to the full version. We can a week later give them case studies on how it's helped other people increase their downloads all the way down the road. And then if at some point some person buys, then they're off of that list and they don't need those marketing sales funnels anymore.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of cool things you can do with that too. We're also exploring putting the buy button, which is currently on, we have a page on the sales page right now. It's just all one page and the buy area is at the bottom.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to explore having the buy page on a secondary page. And you might be wondering, well, why are you doing that? That's an extra step. And yes, it is. And that's because you want to know how many people who land on that first page are interested in buying. And at that point, you can actually implement something called retargeting, which is you can give a cookie to that person and then be able to find them later to, if they didn't complete a purchase, they said they were interested, but they didn't complete a purchase, you can target them through advertisements or videos on YouTube and a lot of cool, fancy, fun, interesting things like that. I, for example, have a lot of videos about podcasting, which would be perfect. And so I can actually do other things here. For example, we're also exploring paid advertising through YouTube, actually. So I can serve a pixel or retarget people who have viewed my podcasting tutorial at podcastingtutorial.com. And then the next time they come on YouTube, they might see an ad for the Smart Podcast Player the next time they play a video. Even if it's like a music video for something completely random, it's targeted specifically to them based off of the actions that they previously have taken. And this is where my head begins to explode because of the possibilities, but also because we're in a realm where that I haven't explored yet either. But again, just trying new things, implementing and testing and seeing what works and seeing what doesn't. That's really what marketing is all about, and building businesses and being an entrepreneur. You're never going to get it right the first time. Never. But you got to keep going because that second time could be it, or the third time, or if you're like Rovio and Angry Birds, the 60th time.
Yeah.
That was their 60th game, I think. For Tim Ferriss, who wrote the 4 Hour Workweek, he went to 20 publishers before the 21st said, yes, we'll publish it for you. I mean, you got to keep going, especially if you know what you're producing is great.
Yeah, such good advice. And yet again, Pat Flynn talks until he can't breathe anymore. So clearly he's so passionate about this. So, I mean, yeah, there's so many good tidbits in there. And I mean, I'm actually starting to explore the YouTube advertising because I'm hearing a lot of good things about how cheap it really is, and the tips and tricks, how you don't pay until you hit the 30th second of the video or whatever finishes playing. And like, there's so many strategies out there and retargeting and stuff. But this all also goes back to, if this seems overwhelming, really step one in that process, for me anyway, and I believe for a lot of people, is knowing your numbers. You need to know, at least, again, in my opinion, how much an average customer is worth to you, how much an email lead is worth to you, what's the lifetime value of your customer. If you don't know these numbers, then you don't necessarily know if what you're spending to acquire a lead is worth it.
Right.
If I'm spending $5 to acquire a lead and I don't know my numbers, is that a good value? Is that low? Is that high? I can compare it to other people's results, but they have different numbers in their business. So very important stuff to know. I'm hoping Mr. Pat Flynn knows his numbers, and I won't quiz him on it now.
Of course. But I mean, the math makes sense, and that's what it is. And I think everybody out there listening, coders, especially, could relate to that. I mean, if you're spending, for example, $5 for a lead, but you see that your conversion rate is, 20%, then if your product is $25, you're spending $20 to make $25.
Yeah, beautiful.
Well, then spend $200 to make $2,500, or spend $20,000 to make $25,000. I mean, you're essentially trading nickels for quarters, at that point, once you get the systems down, once you figure it out. And then it becomes, okay, when people land on my page as a lead, how can I make my conversion rates 22% or 25%? And it's just so amazing when you get down to that level. So it's really important from the beginning to track, like Trevor was saying.
Absolutely. And I mean, I use Lead Pages to do this. I'm assuming, do you use Lead Pages at all?
Yeah, I'm an advisor for the company, actually. So.
Of course. You're very involved with the company. I absolutely love Lead Pages. I probably bought it off of a webinar that probably you ran, or you teamed up with either Tim Page or Clay Collins.
Yeah.
And I purchased it from there. But oh man, what an amazing investment I had made! Like, it's paid off like 10 million times the purchase price. So I use it all the time. And I remember I did one simple thing, like I added the word "now" to a button. I said, sign up or versus sign up now, or start the course versus start the course now. And it increased my conversion rate from, like, I don't know, it was like 10% to 20%.
Yeah, isn't that crazy?
Such an incredible increase. And it's just one word. And like Pat was saying, moving the button here or putting on a second page, or there's so many things, as coders, sometimes we're not very creative. But the beauty about this is you don't really need to be that creative. You could just change it. You can change it to be whatever else you could think of on the spot at that moment. And then you split test it using something like Lead Pages or any other software out there. You don't specifically have to use it. That's just what I use, and I definitely support them because they've been an excellent company and they've given me nothing but fantastic service. So by all means, use Lead Pages. But so important. Split testing, especially prices. You mentioned that as well, that you're testing out the monthly prices. I love it. I love that. I'm testing out right now with my products. I have it going, selling for $147 all the way up to $997 because I don't know. I just don't, it could even be going up to, $2,000 or something like that. You don't know until you test it. So that's a very universal thing when it comes to businesses. And I don't know how much more time we have left. There were so many more things I'd written down to talk about.
No, let's keep going. 10 more minutes. We'll go.
10 more minutes. Okay. The one thing that I also wanted to really touch on that I think, I was sitting down having lunch a couple days ago, and I was reading in a thread in the Smart Passive Income group. Actually, what's the URL for that? Where can they go to join that group? Because I think it's fantastic.
If you go to, I believe it's smartpassiveincome.com/community, it'll take you there.
Yeah, it probably is. I think I recognize that URL. Facebook group, nothing but the SPI listeners. It's probably the one group that I'm the most active in, and it's completely free. So I absolutely love that group. In any case, they were talking about the challenges they had faced in terms of, it was one person specifically, I really felt their pain when they were talking about this. They were talking about how they have 2 small children, and they were working a full-time job, and they were trying to find time to work on their business. And after they posted that, it was something like 20 or 30 comments from 20 or 30 different people just saying, oh my God, I'm in the same spot as you. Here's what I'm doing that's sort of helping to allow me to grow my business. So if you're out there and you have children and you're struggling to find time, I want to hear from Pat, because Pat's got 2 lovely little children who he loves and adores and talks about all the time. I feel like I know his kids and his family so well. What tips would you have to someone who's facing that situation? They're working full time, they've got small children, and they want to grow their business. What can they do? Yeah,
I mean, it's absolutely hard. It's hard. It's a really hard thing to do, and I'm very blessed to be able to work from home so that I can just immediately walk out the door and see them, or after they go to bed, then go and work. I mean, that's essentially what I was doing for the first 3 or 4 years. My kids would go to sleep, and then I would get work done. But I didn't have a 9-to-5 job at that point. So I can understand how at the end of the day, you're going to be super tired. You're going to use all of that decision-making juice in your brain already. So one thing I recommend doing, if possible, is to really get focused on, okay, where is it that you're spending your time? And there might be things that you can find where you can sort of understand that you don't need those things. Television, for example, is an obvious one. And I think, a lot of us maybe spend a little bit too much doing things like that maybe aren't essential. Like, what are the essential things? There's a book called Essentialism that you should all read. That is huge. It's been a huge impact on my life and many lives of many other successful entrepreneurs. But really, excuse me, almost at the end of my voice here. But I mean, here's a really good strategy I shared before that a lot of people connected with, especially people who had 9-to-5 jobs. So when you wake up in the morning, most likely you're waking up because you have to go and take care of stuff for other people. And recently I actually connected with somebody who, and this is really interesting because I was a night owl for the longest time. So I would do all my work after the kids were asleep. So I wouldn't even try to work when the kids were there because my purpose is to be there with my kids when they are there. Because my son's in school, though my daughter, she's only 2, so she's still at home too. So I still spend, when she's here at the house, time with her as much as I can. But really what has been working lately is switching to a morning routine. So waking up earlier than I would have normally done. And even if you just do an extra hour for yourself in the morning, that goes a very, very long way. When you wake up in the morning for you, knowing that you are doing something to improve your life and doing stuff to work for yourself and your family before you dedicate that time and energy to somebody else's dream in life and family, you're doing it for yourself first. You're going to be so much more driven, and you're going to do whatever it takes to get things done in that small amount of time that you have. And again, like I said, just an hour a day really, really helps. And it helps you when you fall asleep too, because you're not just waking up for somebody else's stuff, to work on somebody else's stuff. You're working it for your own stuff too. So you're going to be more excited, more energized. It's sort of like in the personal finance world, they tell people, pay yourself first. So when you get that paycheck, before you pay your bills and stuff, just drop $100 here in your bank account, just like it's a normal thing to do every time. The first thing you do is and then over time, the nest egg is going to build and build and build. And that's how a lot of people are able to, generate a large nest egg through that, just paying yourself first. You can do the same thing with your time. So paying yourself first with time in the morning is probably the easiest in terms of strategy to do, beyond just sort of taking things that you might be doing that might not be essential and putting those aside to, find chunks of time to work on your business as well. And then also understanding that, in that short amount of time that you may have to really make it work. Make sure that what, you don't want to waste time. You don't want to get distracted. And typically, if that's only the time that you have, you sort of have a rainbow effect going on where you have a certain countdown timer going in terms of when you're done. You're going to be more motivated to work that way, but also trying to be optimized and efficient and kind of doing those small things. The 20% that's going to give you 80% of the results. Mm-hmm. There might be some emails to answer. Well, is that helping you actually move forward in your business? Or is the brainstorming of your next product actually going to do that? Those types of things, really focus. Like a lot of us work and we're busy, but we're not actually getting anywhere because we're just in that mode of wanting to stay busy as opposed to actually working on things that will actually help us move forward. So constantly thinking about when you are working, is this actually helping me move forward? And that will help you understand what is essential when you are actually working, if that makes sense.
Beautiful. And I mean, that's exactly what the group focused on. I think the number one tip that everybody related with and a tip that they gave to other people was wake up early, wake up earlier. Yeah. Don't wake up for the job, wake up for yourself. That comes back to the passion. You have to have the passion. One guy, he's waking up at 3 a.m. just so he could get whatever it was, an hour or an hour and a half of work in before he had to shuffle off and get to his job.
See, he wants it. He knows it's his priorities.
Amazing. That is dedication. And I think
it's like Gary Vaynerchuk says it a little bit more harsh. He just says like, effing wake up earlier, or you don't need 8 hours of sleep. Like, just wake up because this is what really matters right now. Yeah. That type of thing. So Crush It by Gary Vaynerchuk would be a good kick in the butt for people too.
Such a good book. I've read it twice back to back. So
yeah, that's great.
One tool I can recommend. I just learned this from Jamie Tardy. Was Rescue Time. Install Rescue Time on your computer. It'll keep track of everything that you're doing on your computer, and it gives you this report card at the end of the week so you can see exactly how you've done, if you've been procrastinating or if you've been working. So it's
scary to look at, actually, because
say again.
No, it's scary to look at sometimes because you don't even know where your time's going sometimes, but that will tell you. It's a great resource for sure.
It's an unbiased slap in the face. That's how I see it anyway. So excellent. Thank you so much, Pat. We've hit our time limit. Thank you so much for kicking it out with your voice there. Thankfully you made it the whole way, and Interconnect Connection more or less hung in there. So all the stars aligned to bring this wonderful content from Mr. Pat Flynn to you guys of the Coders Startup. So thank you again so much for joining, and it was such a pleasure and an honor, Pat.
Thanks for having me, Trevor. Appreciate it.
Take care of yourself.